Hi, I'm Owen Canfield with the Oklahoman, joined today by Senator James Lankford, new senator here in Oklahoma, been on the job now 6 months. Senator, thank you for being here today.
Months, yeah.
Previously in the House, of course.
Right.
Tell us, is there any great difference between what goes on in the Senate, your experience so far in the Senate and the House? I know they talk about it being a deliberative body and all that, but what are the differences you've seen?
Yeah, it's actually a running joke with the incoming freshmen. There are 13 of us that are new freshmen. We use the line repetitively when we get stuck all night debating some really tiny piece of minutia in the Senate, call it the greatest deliberative body in the world,
right,
which is its nickname. There's a tremendous difference between the House and the Senate. The House is really built around, if you can get 218 people, there's 435, you can get 218, you don't care what the other side thinks.
Right.
You run over them. If you're in the Senate, completely different. You have to have 60 people even to agree to vote on anything. Now, it's a simple majority to win it, but you have to have 60 people to agree to vote on it.
60 of the 100.
60 of the 100, that's correct. So you have to have Democrats on board with everything you do, or you can't vote on it. It's the same when the Democrats were in the majority. They had to have Republicans on board, or everything stopped. That's a very different style of debate and of engagement than it is in the House. So two very different bodies. They're not just one body's 435 and the other body's 100. Rules are different, structures are different.
As we speak today on July 6th, in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of news coming out of Washington. Right. Supreme Court mostly voted on, or came down with an opinion on Obamacare, kept Obamacare up and running, the subsidies. What now can the Republicans who were expecting a different ruling, right, what now can they do, if anything, going forward regarding right, the Affordable Care Act in terms of tweaking it, making it better?
So we better keep moving on this because it really has a negative effect on an awful lot of people. In my state, what I hear over and over again is, my prices are going up. My deductible is now so high I can't afford to pay it anymore, so I might as well not have insurance at all. Or they say my doctor is now leaving private practice and is going to a hospital. It's harder to get to them before. So there are real serious effects. And we still have the most serious, those that are still coming. The Independent Payment Advisory Board, this 15-member panel that has the sole responsibility in the nation to determine what's most cost-effective in healthcare, they start next year. The Cadillac tax that happens for union-based plans or plans for people that the federal government considers too good of a plan. Right. That starts in a couple of years. So there's a lot of issues. So key things that I believe we still can do. We can still deal with things like 40-hour work week, Independent Payment Advisory Board, medical device tax. Find every way that we can to be able to take one section after another out of this law that has a negative effect on the people of our entire country, but especially of Oklahoma.
You mentioned the 40-hour work week.
Yes.
Explain to our viewers what you mean by that.
So
some may not understand what
well,
you're
yeah,
talking about.
There was a real shift that happened, and multiple things kind of happened behind the scenes. For instance, like the student loans were taken over by the Affordable Care Act. That's one of the funding mechanisms, is the takeover of all student loans and federalizing them. Another one was the shift in the 40-hour work week. In the past, everyone just assumed full-time was 40 hours. Now, full-time, according to the Affordable Care Act, is 30 hours.
Right.
And so a lot of people used to get a job that was 38, 39 hours, and they said they wanted to go full-time, they want to have all the benefits and everything else, but want to get as many hours as they can. To be able to do that now, you have to get 2 part-time jobs at 25 or 28 hours a piece to be able to keep up with that. So it's very difficult to find entry-level jobs that'll do 40 hours a week, or even do 35 hours a week.
So you'd like to bump that back up to 40?
I'd like to bump that back up so people don't have to work multiple jobs to have the same amount of income. They can just stay focused on one. Just the transportation loss and the time loss and everything else is pretty dramatic for individuals and families.
You mentioned transportation in a different context than I'm going to ask you about.
Sure.
Road bill is needs to get funded here soon. The current bill expires soon. Senator Inhofe has presented a bill that he thinks will work. It's a matter of paying for it, though.
Right.
What do you see as the likelihood of that making it to the finish line?
It is one of the great benefits of Senator Inhofe being long-term in the Senate is that he is the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee. He will write the law dealing with transportation for the country this year. The challenge is he's writing all the policy. Orrin Hatch from Utah is writing all the funding side of it. So while Inhofe's work is just about done, we're still waiting for Orrin Hatch to be able to finish up the work there, which he's working on, to be able to work on the funding. That's the biggest issue. The current gas tax doesn't cover the amount that we're spending in transportation. So there's really 2 issues there. We either need to not spend so much, find some things that we're spending money on we shouldn't do. There are roads that we do in Oklahoma that we put federal dollars into that we should not put federal dollars into. They're really city, state, county roads. And while those roads may need repair, that's not the responsibility of the people from Kansas or of Maine or of Alaska to help pay for that road that's not a federal road here in our state. So that's a big fight that we have in the days ahead, is to try to stop calling something federal that's really a city road or a side road well off the interstate, and to start prioritizing what are seriously well-established federal roads.
We're up against it a little bit on time, so I'll ask you one last question. What is sort of at the top of your to-do list as a freshman senator? Is there any one thing?
There are multiple issues, obviously, but what has to be at the top of me, I chair the committee dealing with regulatory affairs. I work with every regulator in the federal government. I really consider that ground zero a lot of the fight that we have right now. We are a heavily regulated nation,
right,
and the more regulations come down, and there may be just another one more small regulation, but that one more small regulation on top of the hundreds of others are drowning out our economy right now. Lots of individual businesses is very hard to maintain or to grow because of the amount of regulations that are coming down. So I'm trying to push us to ask some simple questions. Does this need to be regulated? Are we the right group to regulate this? Should this be a state or local entity that get the federal government entirely out of it? Is there real statutory authority for this? Because a lot of the regulations aren't our job at all and shouldn't be done by that particular regulator. And how are we imposing that? Is it the most economical? Are the people that are affected included, or are they just imposed on them? So we've got to correct a lot of the issues in the regulatory scheme in America, or we will continue to choke out this economy that should be leading the world, but it's lagging from what we are traditionally.
Well, Senator James Lankford, thank you for coming by the Oklahoman today. Always good to see you. And thank you for watching here on News OK.